Speak now to Mark Littlewood, who's Director of Popular Conservatism. Good morning, Mark. Nigel had previously said quite a lot that his ambition was to radically cut taxes to boost growth. I think looking rather at the Laffer curve model. Do you think it's right, though, that he is now potentially, and we anticipate he's going to say this has been pre-briefed, one assumes, by the party, that actually the size of the bloated state needs to be taken under control before any sort of tax relief can be granted?
Well, it's certainly a major shift in direction by Nigel Farage, Alex, and you're right. I mean, at the last election, I think the total number of tax cuts promised by Reform UK was £70 billion, pretty chunky. What Nigel Farage is now going to say is that the public finances are in such a woeful state that mission one is to fix the public finances, and only when that is done are tax cuts feasible. Now, that I think is a prudent position to take, perhaps, but it raises two big questions. One, you've just alluded to, Alex, about are there some tax rates at the moment that are so high that if you cut them, the government might actually bring in more revenue? This is the Laffer curve argument, that if you tax income at 0%, you don't bring in any revenue. And if you tax income at 100%, you don't bring in any revenue because nobody would work. So somewhere between the two, there's the sweet spot. Where is that sweet spot is the question. You might argue, for example, that if you reversed the VAT rise on private school fees, actually you could raise money because you would have fewer pupils going into the state sector, and that would save the government money. So there's all sorts of calculations about tax. The other big question, of course, is, OK, great, what are we going to cut? Because there's no doubt, and Nigel Farage is completely right about this, that the public finances are completely out of control. We are running very substantial budget deficits. There has never been any austerity in the last 25 years. There has only been varying degrees of largesse. It is now 25 years since any government balanced the books. And we need to find many tens of billions of savings, not just to balance the books today, but because if you look over the coming years and decades, government expenditure, all things equal, will rise. We have an ageing population, for example, so expect healthcare costs and social care costs to rise. So what are the big chunky things that you could cut? There's a whole array of tiny things that you can point to. Again, Alex, you mentioned foreign aid. Fine, abolish it, but it's nickel and dime stuff in terms of actually balancing the budget. And I think what Reform's got to do now is, rather than saying we will scrap all diversity training courses in the public sector, we won't spend money on rainbow yanlards, we'll cut the foreign aid budget to zero, all of which might be wise things to do, but are nothing like the savings you need to make. So what's the sort of 50, 100 billion, 150 billion pounds worth of savings Reform would make? I doubt Nigel Farage will outline that today, but they need to outline it before the next election.
One assumes, actually, that where he may focus his attention would be drill, baby drill, something akin to Donald Trump over in America. And when you look at the number of new gas and oil wells that Norway is bringing online at the moment, and we're doing absolutely nothing because Ed Miliband has poured a load of concrete down them, disabling us from being energy self-sufficient while we still run the highest energy bills in the Western world, if not the world. Would that be a sensible place for Reform to begin?
Yeah, so the other thing, the other way that you could approach it, if you like, looking down the other end of the telescope, is to say, let's assume for the sake of argument that tax and spending are more or less fixed. We're not going to make any enormous changes to healthcare spending, education spending or whatever. We might make some tweaks. How do we actually start getting Britain to balance the books? Well, you might do what economists describe as supply-side reforms. That's to say, you make it easier and cheaper to do entrepreneurial things. You've touched on energy there. If you drill, if you perhaps allow fracking, perhaps and get away from a lot of the net zero stuff, energy prices start to fall. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean there's immediately more money pouring into the exchequer, but it does mean that more businesses should find it easier to thrive and survive, to employ people. You could cut back employment red tape. You could cut back the vast amount of red tape that we've now imposed on financial services, supposedly our most productive area of the economy. So if you can find ways of letting the private sector breathe not having them spending nearly all of their time complying with rules, then you can get an awful lot done. Growth goes up, more people are employed, more people are getting pay rises, more people are moving into higher skilled jobs, and suddenly the money does start to flow into the exchequer. Or if not suddenly, over a year or two, you're in a much, much brighter position. So I'm very keen to hear what Reform are going to do on that. And I think they're likely to stay consistent on that net zero is economic unilateral disarmament. And generally speaking, and I know Nigel Farage is expected to say this as well, although we've more or less got Brexit done, we haven't really used any of our new freedoms and powers to any great effect, to be honest. It gives us the ability to deregulate, but in fact, we haven't really seized that chance to date.
I was going to ask you that, actually, because Rachel Reeves is already pointing the finger everywhere but herself, of course, about the disaster of our economy, still blaming Brexit, as the left wants to do. And when people go, well, Brexit's not been a success, like you, I'm minded to say, what Brexit? We're still paying billions to the EU. We're creeping back in by stealth to their regulatory orbit. Absolutely nothing has changed. We've not really deregulated or used any of the levers of power or the autonomy to deviate from essentially the sort of slow demise of the continental economic ethos. And yeah, Nigel wants to deliver Brexit Britain. And I say, well, good on him, because at least we know, probably for the first time since that historic referendum in 2016, if Nigel Farage gets into number 10, that's frankly the very first Brexiteer to run the country. I don't care what people say about Boris Johnson, which side of it he campaigned, or Rishi Sunak. As far as I can tell, they didn't really have the guts or the gumption to deliver Brexit. Do you think, actually, with a sort of radical new look at how we can regain sovereignty in key areas, that would be a huge boost to economic growth?
Certainly could be. And I roughly agree with you there, Alex. I mean, what Brexit gives you is it gives the UK government a whole range of buttons it could press or levers it could pull that otherwise were in the control of the European Union. And although I would say, more or less got Brexit done, there's still some big issues around Northern Ireland, but we've got Brexit done. We haven't chosen really to press any of those buttons or pull any of those levers. We have not deregulated our financial services for sake of argument. We haven't looked at all of the EU red tape that we were complaining about for the near 50 years that we are in the European Union, and said, well, let's incinerate it. We haven't even lightly singed it at the edges. So again, I think what would be interesting at some point, I doubt we'll hear it in specificity today from Nigel Farage and Reform, is, OK, what were all the EU regulations that we inherited, which we then, if you like, hit copy and paste and put them into English law, that you think we should now repeal? And how do you think that would actually help the economy? And I think there is a vast task to be done here. My own plan, my own suggestion, I wasn't unique in putting this forward, but was very disappointed the Conservatives didn't do it. We should take all of the EU regulation that we inherited, and we should say all of it will fall, all of it will be rescinded by, let's say, the 1st of January 2030, unless we specifically choose to renew it. So the default is the regulations go, the regulations die. If a case can be made that this regulation or that one is particularly wise or spectacularly important or significant to the business area, fine, but the working assumption should be rescind it. And unfortunately, the working assumption since we finally got out of the European Union has been to retain it.
Or get back in, it seems to me, on a lot of these things. Right. Very quickly, because I haven't got much time left, and it is a big topic to get our teeth into, but I just want to sort of, a quick summary from you. I mean, when it comes to expenditure in this country, the main word has got to be welfare. The amount of people now claiming welfare for mental health conditions, anxiety and so on and so forth, the Motability scheme where people were given free cars because they had constipation, the amount of people who frankly have only just moved to the country, who have no ancestry here, foreigners who are a drain on the system, immediately being able to get access to welfare. That's something that really needs to be tackled. Do you think that is going to be a quick fix?
Won't be a quick fix, but it will be the right fix, Alex. You're quite right. Easily the biggest government department in terms of spending is the DWP, the Department of Work and Pensions, the Welfare Department. Welfare has got completely out of control. We now have the ludicrous position where more than half of households in Britain claim more in benefits than they pay in tax. That was never the intention of the welfare state. And I would like some political party to go back to the founding principles of the welfare state, those of Beveridge, a lefty liberal, as it happens, who said that welfare should be temporary and at subsistence levels. So I think we've got to focus welfare on, I don't know, the bottom 5, 10, perhaps 15% of the population who really, really need it, not scattergun it around so virtually everybody qualifies for some benefit or another. There are massive savings to be made here, but some controversial choices to be made. But you're right, that's the spending line that a serious government needs to look at.
It's amazing,
really
isn't it?
Down.
How many people would actually get off their sofas and go to work if they weren't given the choice? Mark, thank you ever so much. Mark Littlewood there, Director of Popular Conservatism.